Welcome to video 3 in the series on chapter 1, or origins. We were talking about Mesopotamia, that land between the rivers. Remember, it was that fertile crescent formed by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Sumer was the earliest civilization in Mesopotamia. And so they had a pattern of conquering and invasion. They had the Sargon of Akkad. They were known for their Sumerian temples, and we'll be looking at some of those. And they were also known for their Sumerian stone statues. These, I'm going to go to the next slide so that you can see one while I talk about it. These were small in or in stature, and they had very large eyes. They had a continuous brow. We kind of call it a unibrow now. And they had a facial expression of astonishment. So when you look at this particular one entitled Standing Man, there's those huge eyes. Notice this statue is only 11 3/4 inches. Notice the unibrow, even though it's got the little arches, right? And the surprised or astonished look. This was made out of white gypsum with limestone and shell insets. In this next slide, you see some various statues. Now notice, even though some are smaller, some are bigger, they all have those same qualities. The unibrow, the surprised look, right? These were carved of stone, and they were found in the shrine room of the Ziggurat at Tel Asmar in Sumer. So these would almost become almost of a, not everyone could go into the uppermost room in a religious building like a ziggurat. So these might be taken by one of the high priests or whatever. You could ask that that statue be placed for you, and that person is kind of your go-between, would take it to that location. And so this would be something that could be preyed upon. It could help you, and according to religious belief. These are some dedicatory statues from the Abu Temple in Tel Asmar, Iraq. These are marble, alabaster, and gypsum, so they could be made of different materials. The tallest figure is approximately 30 inches tall. So, and then you've got these smaller ones here, okay? So again, you know, these were very popular during that Sumerian kind of culture in this time period. Here is a statue of Gudea. This is a Neo-Sumerian, more of a New Sumerian. This is made out of a dark diorite, okay? It was a type of rock. If you've ever studied geology, you've learned about diorite. So it's black, it's very dark, sometimes has maybe a little bit of a greenish cast and just the right light. This one is only 3/8 by 8.5 by 11 5/8. So again, you see the prevalence of these statues. Now, when we think of Mesopotamia, this is where we start to bring in myths, gods, and goddesses. And you're going to be you've already studied about, you know, the purpose of myths and gods and goddesses. There's an intimate association through these myths and gods and goddesses with nature and animism. The myths are part of the ritual fabric of their everyday life in Mesopotamia. Polytheism, that belief in more than one god, is linked to nature and its forces. Cosmology of chaos and conflict, a famous piece, the Babylonian creation. So belief in multiple gods and goddesses and myths are a very big part of this culture. Also, the architectural structures called ziggurats are very important. These are massive terrace towers made of rubble and brick, and we're going to look at one of them pretty extensively in a second. It was a spiritual center of the city and state. So it would be literally in the center of the city, and it became the center for spiritual as well as state issues, which is kind of bizarre because in our culture, we have that separation of church and state. It was a shrine, it was a temple. And so, there's a famous one, the Abu Temple in Tel Asmar, Iraq. Now, here is, as we said, a ziggurat. It is, and I want you to look at the size. Look at the scale of the people up next to this huge stairway, okay? This structure is terraced, okay? So you've got this level, okay, and a little terrace. You've got another level, little terrace, another level, and then here is the ultimate level. So this ziggurat is like a pyramid stepped temple tower. Okay, it's an architectural and a religious structure that is characteristic of those major cities in Mesopotamia, which is now, Mesopotamia is mainly what we know as Iraq today. It can be, the time periods on these ziggurats were 2200 until 500 BCE. The ziggurat was always built with a core of mud and brick, and then an exterior that was covered with baked brick. So you have those two different kinds of brick made out of two different, materials. It had no internal chambers, and it was usually square or rectangular. It could be averaged somewhere between 170 feet square or 125 by 170 feet at the base. There are approximately 25 ziggurats that are known structures from the past. Most of them are equally divided amongst Sumer, Babylonia, and Assyria. And I'll be posting a video for you that you can take like a 3D animated kind of tour. Now, this is, again, served as both a shrine and a temple, and possibly it could have also been a funerary site. It symbolized the sacred mountain, okay? Again, with that mountain idea that we've heard before, that linked heaven and earth. So it's not surprising that it's big, it's tall, it's closer to heaven, but this was a very important type religious structure. All right, so again, I'm going to be posting that video in Blackboard, but it'll take you through kind of a virtual tour of it. Now, notice something from above. You had a staircase here, and on the side, okay? You would come into this location. You could come and go down to this level. You could go up to this level, up to this level. And again, here's this curtained area, which would be for only the most religious and the most high in that religion or religious order. All right, here's a real to life picture, okay? So this isn't just a diagram, this is a real picture. All right, so this one is called Pyramid of the Sun, and this one is in Mexico. Okay, the Aztec, this has a very Aztec feel, right? Because it's during that time. This one is dated, it had to be begun before 150 CE. The length of each base is 768 feet. The height is 210 feet. So you notice there's a very big similarity between this Aztec pyramid and that ziggurat structure, okay? So a lot of the same sort of concepts, a lot of the same evolution of civilization and architectural. Also from Mesopotamia, we have a famous piece of literature, Gilgamesh. It was called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it was the first real epic. It's the world's first literary epic. It was recited orally for years before it was written down centuries later. They would just pass it on verbally. It was first literary work to come to terms with death or non-being, and it reflects that human need for immortality and ideology. Now, also, some important aspects of Mesopotamia. There was Hammurabi. He was the first great king of Babylon. He united the city-states of Akkad and Sumer under his rule. He created this famous Hammurabi's Law Code. And it was created on a stele, and we're going to talk about what a stele is in a minute. And it was inscribed with the law code of Hammurabi. This is both a legal document and a work of art. It's the most extensive set of laws to survive antiquity. It's very secular, but it bore force of divine decree. So it's very, not only is it, part of the law and part of everyday life, the secular, but it's also got some divine or some religious decrees. It's a written law that was the landmark and advance of human rights. So this was the first attempts at human rights within a civilization. It's a storehouse of information regarding class divisions, family relations, and human rights. It codified the existing legal practices in an effort to unify territories of Babylonian Empire. So it's kind of like creating this centralized system for dealing with legal issues. Women were considered inferior. Shocking, ladies, right? That's been the history for a long time. But here's what's interesting and very forward thinking in Mesopotamia is that not only were they considered inferior, but they enjoyed considerable legal protections by these laws of Hammurabi. The relief at the top, and again, we'll talk about a relief in a second, shows the enthroned Shamash, the sun god, who controlled plant life and weather. It dispelled evil spirits of disease and personified the righteousness and just. All right, so this is a picture of the stele of Hammurabi, okay? So here you see, first of all, this is sculpted out of diorite, okay? Again, that black, got a little green cast to that stone. This is 7 feet high, all right? And 28 inches of it is what we call the relief, okay? Now, a relief is where, notice this all started off as this one piece of stone, right? From this, sculpted out is this image of King Hammurabi and Shamash, the sun god, who was the god of justice, giving a scepter and a ring to Hammurabi. So from this rounded piece of stone, this image was cut out from that in relief. We call that a relief because it's cut out from it. Okay, it comes forward from it. Also, you see, all of this is a hieroglyphic type writing that contains all of these laws. Okay, so King Hammurabi's on the left. You've got over 300 laws included in this, including and predating the biblical eye for an eye. You know, if you did wrong by me, if you plucked my eye, then I have the right to pluck your eye. So that's included in these laws. All right, here's a close-up of this, okay? All right, so here are some interesting ones from Hammurabi's code. Number 134, if a man has been taken prisoner and there is no food in his house and his wife enters the house of another, then that woman bears no blame. The man didn't provide for her, so she had to go somewhere else to get food. She's not to blame. 138, if a man divorces his spouse who has not borne him children, he shall give to her all the silver of the bride price and restore to her the dowry which she brought from the house of her fathers, and so he shall divorce her. Well, that's pretty sweet, okay? Especially for people who were not considered to be full citizens, women. Number 141, if a man's wife dwelling in a man's house has set her face to leave, has been guilty of dissipation, has wasted her house, has neglected her husband, then she shall be prosecuted. If her husband says she's divorced, he shall let her go her way. He should give her nothing for divorce. If her husband says she is not divorced, her husband may espouse another woman, and that woman shall remain a slave in the house of her husband. So he gets to say whether there's a divorce or not. Here's the 196. If a man has destroyed the eye of a free man, his own eyes shall be destroyed. If he's destroyed the eye of a plebeian or broken the bone of a plebeian, he shall pay 1 mina of silver. If he has destroyed the eye of a man's slave or broken the bone of a man's slave, he shall pay half his value. So some interesting laws that were already in place even back during this Sumerian